Hi and welcome to the Make Your Own Cheese Board Kit. We're going to have loads of fun doing this, so let's get started. Okay then, let's get into the detail of making one of our chopping boards. Now this applies whether it's a walnut chopping board or an ash chopping board like this one. But before you start, you want to gather a couple of things. The first thing is a pencil, preferably one with a fine tip. Next, you're going to need some kind of block to use as a sanding block. You really will need this. So it doesn't matter. It could be, the TV remote control, anything you like, just something to wrap sandpaper around. So gather those things before you start. The Osmo kit you've got, we'll come back to that later on. So I'm going to put that to one side for now. Okay then, so in the kit you have got three different types of sandpaper, 80 grit, 120 grit and 180 grit. How this works is the 80 grit does all of the work, making it flat, and it takes off material quickly. The 120 grit removes the scratches you put in with the 80 grit, and then the 180 grit removes the scratches from the 120 grit, and that's what gives you a really super nice finish. So we basically have to do this 3 times. Yes, 3 times. So if you do have access to a power sander, it's a really good idea to use a power sander. It saves a lot of time. You need 3 discs, an 80 grit, a 120 grit and a 180 grit, but you could do most of the work with a power sander. But I'm going to do this by hand just to show you how much fun it is. So I'm going to remove those 2 pieces of paper, and I have got my 80 grit called P80. I'm going to wrap that around my block like this so that I can hold onto it. Now I want to make sure that my board is flat. So how can I make sure that my board is flat? Well, you can do it by putting a pencil line on like this, very light, very light, all the way over the board. Now once we've done that, when I start to sand it, this pencil mark should come off evenly. Now we really want to make sure that they come off evenly. If you've got a pencil that's still in one area, it means that that area is actually low. So it means you have to sand everything around it to get the whole thing down to be flat. If a pencil is coming off an area super quickly, quicker than everywhere else, then you know that area is high. So that area is going to need a bit more work. And so all we do, we just keep going until all the pencil's gone, and then we apply another line and we do the same thing again. But before we start doing anything at all, you first of all want to take the arris off. The arris is the sharp edge on the chopping board here. You want to take that off because you don't want to catch your hand and kind of give yourself splinters or risk splitting the wood. So we'll just take a couple of minutes. We'll get the sandpaper at 45, how can you see that? 45-degree angle like this, and just go up and down like this. So you can see that I've taken off just a very sharp corner. So I'm just going to do that all the way around. So once we've done that, I'm now going to work on the main surface of our cheese board. And I'm going to work with the grain like this. If you've got a power sander that's a random orbital sander, you don't need to worry about the grain. But if you're doing it by hand, you must go with the grain. So we're just going to put the sandpaper on there and go back and forward. Okay then, so I've given that a fairly even sand, and hopefully you can still see the pencil marks on there, and we can clearly see the pencil marks coming off fairly evenly across the whole thing, which means this is pretty flat. Good news, less sanding to do. But it might not be the case, you might have little ridges, but if you just feel over it with your hand, check it's nice and flat, and this is pretty flat. So I think we'll just carry on a little bit, get the pencil marks off, and then we can move on. I can tell straight away that this side is going to need a bit more work. It's just a little bit more rough to the touch, and it's going to take me some time. But just keep with the grain, go back and forward until you're happy with it, okay? Okay, so that's looking pretty good now. So what we're going to do now is focus on the edges. Now you can round this over really nicely if you want to have the whole thing completely curved over. Or you can just take the edge off until a point where you're happy with it. It's completely up to you, but do that with your 80 grit paper. So first of all, I need to sand the edge itself. So I'm just going to do that. Of course, it's much better if you have a workbench or a vise and you can hold this. It's a lot easier to do, but we'll just go for it. Okay. Pretty happy with that side there, it's nicely rounded, not going to give me any splinters. So now I'm going to move on to the end here. So before we start, I want to go across this end grain like this, okay? Just want to make sure that I've got this nicely done. Now you want to take the time to get all the roughness off this end grain here. It really will make a difference. So just take the time, just go back and forward until you've got all the roughness gone. Okay, that's feeling pretty good. Now, of course, the other side. Yeah, this one, let's do that. Okay, so that looks pretty good. What I want to do now is just get the inside of this hole in here. So I'm just going to get a piece of the sandpaper. Now be careful with this, because if you get the sandpaper and you go round like this, you're going to put scratches, circular scratches all around here, and they take a long time to get out by hand, so be very careful. So we're just going to go with the grain, with the line of the grain inside this hole here. Now if you do want to go right the way around, just make sure that your paper doesn't fold over onto the bit on the outside. Okay, same on the other side. Okay, that's great. So now I'm going to move on, do exactly the same thing again with the 120 grit, okay? Okay, that's the 120 grit done. So I'm just going to clear off now any dust and stuff out of the way. And then I'm going to move on to my 180 grit. Now this is as smooth as you need to go for a chopping board. To be honest with you, even 120 grit would probably be okay. But we're going to do this anyway. Here we go. Okay, that is looking fab. Feels nice and smooth all over. So we've just got the last bit on the hole to do. Now on this last bit here, really take your time with this bit. Make sure that you get this hole really nice and smooth all the way around. So I'll just do that now. So make sure it's nice and smooth and you're perfectly happy with it, that all of your kind of rounded edges are matched, and you're ready to go to the next stage. So what we're going to do now is clean down the work surface, take away as much dust as we can, and then we're going to apply the Osmo finish. So I'll just tidy up, I'll come straight back. So we're going to apply the Osmo finish. The Osmo comes in a little pack like this. So you just want to warm it up in your hands, smush it around, give it a smush. Okay, once you squidge it all around, squidge it all down to the bottom of the pack, and then you can open your pack. Once you've got it, you can either pour it straight onto the chopping board, but I think it's better to put it into a little pot like this. Okay, you can see we've got a little bit of oil in there. I know it doesn't look like a lot, but it is more than enough, I assure you. So we get all our little Osmo cloths, we dip it in. You only need to dip it in about that much, okay? You don't need any more on the cloth than that. And then we just apply it to the wood. And we just keep working this cloth back and forward, because we don't want to apply too much oil, so it will take a long time to dry, and obviously we really don't want that. And you'll see it's amazing how far you can spread this this oil out. It really is amazing stuff. So when you think it's run out, turn it over on the other side, and you'll see you get more out of it again. And just keep working it like that. When it gets dry, eventually get a bit more on there, and away you go. Now, once you've done one side, just look at it in different lights and see if you can see any dry spots. I can see a few on mine here. I've got a little bit up here. And just make sure you have actually worked the oil into the grain of the wood. Okay, next we're going to do end grain. A tiny bit more oil. Now on the end grain you need to put more on there because it will soak in. So just get it so it's all soaked in on the end grain. Oops. Okay, and then we're going to move on to the side. Get that done. Okay, so that's all our sides covered. On this side, yes, that's all done. Okay, that's everything covered. So once we've got to this point, we now want to get some kitchen roll and just take off as much as we possibly can of any standing oil. So I'm just going to get my kitchen roll, put that down. So you get your kitchen roll like so, give it a good wipe. You can be vigorous with it. You want to make sure you get off as much oil as you can. If you put too much on there, it's not a problem, but it might take, you know, a good couple of weeks to dry, and you don't want that. This will take about 12 hours if you do it right. Okay, you make sure you get every component like that. every edge. Okay, and then whenever you've finished, you get yourself a little block of wood or something like that, just to rest one corner of it on, and just leave it like this. Okay, you leave it like that for about 12 hours. Make sure these cloths, you spread them out like this and let them dry, because if they're bunched up, they can spontaneously combust apparently, although I've never seen that happen. But you just leave it like that for 12 hours. Then 12 hours from now, go back, and with the Osmo that you've got left in the pot, you just apply a second coat to it again. And the second coat really does make it sing. So I hope you had fun making your chopping board. Even more fun if you used a random orbital sander instead of a hand sander. But I hope you had fun. Cheers, guys. Bye.